let's do a little bit of discussion about the patch notes. So obviously, I'm only going to be really commenting on the ones that went to the main branch. And at any point, if you have any questions in chat, any extra input that you would like me to assess, feel free to suggest it. I'm going to try and do like a little bit of an oversight of them. I obviously have managed to play a little bit of them. I'm not really going to be kind of like foresighting power levels or saying this is way too powerful, that is way too powerful, or those kinds of things. I'm just going to give the initial read of the kinds of different features that we have to play with, as well as the kind of giant impacts they have, as well as the kinds of things that I've been looking for being added to the game that have already been added now. Cool. So, patch notes for the Friends and Foes update is the second major update for Monster Train that adds new champions, bosses, new cards, and artifacts, which are combined together to add a significant amount of new strategic options and replayability. I was talking with Rito off camera about this in terms of like, we were just focusing on the adds of the new champions as well as the new Exiled starter cards. Obviously, there's also new bosses, new cards, new artifacts, but we were specifically focusing on those two. And in our focus on those two, we both came to the conclusion that adding, 10 cards, right? 5 of them are champions, 5 of them are the Exiled starter cards. Adding 10 cards has an outsized impact on the amount of replayability for this game, which I am so excited to see that they were able to manage that kind of balance for it, right? I'm not talking about balance in terms of like game balance, but I'm talking about like the fact that like adding 1 card to STS to a character is like a drop in a bucket, but adding these cards, especially because you get them inevitably in the runs that you are playing in these Exiled starter clans, huge impact, massive. Also, a lot of them feel like they are more, I've described them previously as specific. They feel like they have specific goals that they need to meet. They have a specific, not necessarily like one specific way in which you can play them, but they're less general, they're less broad than the base ones, which makes sense. They do get unlocked after you've completed Covenant level 5, or Covenant level 5, I believe it is, they get unlocked after you've completed Covenant level 5. So the first champions kind of give you a little bit of an idea, and then the second champions have the ability to capitalize on the fact that by the time you have unlocked them, you understand more about the game, so they are not overwhelming to those kinds of players. Really, really enjoy the way that they managed that. So we've also added a number of frequently requested player features like personal run records in the logbook, an enemy wave counter in battle. I have been asking for this since the very start of the game. So very pleased to see it. While that is the case, though, I have been asking this since the game launched, and I'm pleased to see it. I'm going to take a while until I actually remember to look at it. So I appreciate it from afar for the moment. And a preview of Ring 3 and 6 bosses in the start of the run. Those two last things are things that I've really felt have been necessary, but especially with the inclusion of the new champions, new bosses for the Ring 3 and Ring 6. Those require a lot more pre-planning. One of them in particular, Talos, has the, Talos being a replacement for Daedalus in Ring 3, has the ability to hit a unit in the front line and strike them to the back line, much like the effect of the Rail Beater. That is something that you need to plan around from the very start. You need to have chumps that you can throw in front of it. You need to have like a build that's resilient to the ability to be shuffled. You need to have multi-different floor solutions with individual minions. You need to have a spell solution. You need to have something, right, so that you can actually deal with that. Daze works, obviously, prevent it from doing its attack. But it brings into sharp focus how important having the preview of Ring 3 and Ring 6 is when they include another boss that you desperately have to plan for. All right, Arcus. Actually, sorry, we'll go to the first one here. I'm just going to skip over the champions because I've uploaded individual videos of the champions on the channel, and the best I could do with the champions at the moment is probably just like giving a general power level overview of them. And I really don't think I have a solid enough grasp at this point to do so. This is a patch note review rather than a balanced review. March of Shields and Vinegrass get better too. Agreed, Yog. 100% agreed. I was talking with Sal about this a little while ago about the evaluation that I have on Vinegrass, thinking that I may be undervaluing it. And I've been taking it more commonly recently in my own individual runs, and I've come like very strongly to the conclusion that I had been undervaluing it. But its inclusion in Talos fights can also be really, really important. It's a very, very salient point, Yogg. All right. Talos, Architect of the Third Ring of Hell. She attacks before the Relentless phase, so attacks every single round, and her strikes give her benefits. So the strike can be daze the target, the strike can be knock them to the back. There is a third effect, I imagine, that I can't think of at the moment, but the broad patch overview is it's good to have another boss for that floor. Daedalus every single time. It's fine, but I do like that variety. And when you get that variety, I really like having the information about it to pre-plan it, right? Like, if let's use the comparison a lot of people are very commonly using, right? Slay the Spire. If in Slay the Spire they added a bunch new bosses, but you didn't know what boss you had on the third act, you would never have the ability to plan at all. Like, you don't necessarily desperately have the ability to plan in the game at the moment either. You don't necessarily get the choice for the next floor, but you do have, these are the 3 enemies I'm going up against. These are the 3 different ways to kind of, the 3 different strengths and weaknesses that I have against these 3 different enemies. I can account for my weaknesses, and my strengths can be capitalized on this fight, and then my weaknesses can be accounted for this fight in a different way, right? You can kind of broadly deal with the cases, but especially with how different bosses tend to be in this game, you wouldn't be able to broadly necessarily account for all of the different cases. So this is just another reinforcement of, I like having the choices. I like that this game gives you a bunch of choice, but the choice is decided at the start of the run. Like the Exiled clan, the different starter clan that you're going to have yourself, all of the different bosses, all of the different aspects of those bosses, all of the different pathing, right? All of it is started from the outset, so you don't feel like you're blindly wandering into a bunch of content, right? You feel like you actually have individual control over the run. It's like if you added way too many extra cards into Monster Train. I mean, an example would be Monster Train, or Slay the Spire, or a bunch of extra relics into Slay the Spire. Suddenly you don't get to plan around your future. You don't get to plan around, I may pick up this card, I may pick up this relic, right? So that's the problem with diluting the possibility set in the game too heavily. Casey Yano, who's one of the developers for Slay the Spire, has a really good point about this in the AMA that came out akin alongside to Slay the Spire's official release, talking about this kind of thing, talking about dilution. And all of this to say, the game is dealing with dilution in a very, very, very good way, because it's never getting too dilute in a single run. It just gives you more meta options for having different individual runs. Cool. Arcus, Darkness Incarnate, starts at the 6th Ring of Hell, summons Dark Shards, a new unit type you must counterplay to survive. I love that they specifically included the discussion of counterplay here, because it kind of makes clear that that was very much a design goal for them in creating Arcus. And I was talking about it earlier in this stream. Arcus I really, really appreciate for having that depth of counterplay. It didn't necessarily always feel like there was a huge amount of counterplay to Fel. Fel oftentimes was, I play out my hand and I hope it's better than yours. Or you do get some decisions, obviously, like, should I play another minion this turn, or should I burn the Scourges you just put in my deck? Or mainly that's the positioning as well, but you get these positioning and you get these kind of like card choices in every combat. You don't necessarily get the ability to counter the enemy's largest abilities by counterplaying them effectively. I really, really like Arcus. Okay. Next up, Seraph the Patient. A new Seraph variety that both attacks before the Relentless phase and applies melee weakness, a new status effect that increases combat vulnerability. Now, Sao, you're still here, aren't you? Isn't SES a much smaller dev team than MT? Yes, it is. It's 2 people. Well, it was 2 people initially. That is to say, for the development side of it. I know that there were artists as well as voice artists involved too. But yeah, the initial kind of broad design team is just Anthony Giovanetti and Casiano. Sao, yes, the question I wanted to ask you is because I think I've felt this in game before. Maybe it got changed, maybe I made a mistake and I didn't actually notice it this way, but does Seraph apply melee weakness before the minion hits the ground? So the melee weakness that Seraph the Patient applies here is on Rally. Rally is the new keyword. We'll look at it later, but it is triggers when you play a unit card on this floor. Morsels don't trigger it. So is it, because I think I played an imp in the front line once and it didn't get the melee weakness. The person behind it did, and I was very confused by it. Which would be an unfortunate kind of thing of like, this chump blocking doesn't really work as well as I'd hoped. Melee weakness is applied on spell cast, start of turn. And what at start of turn? Like cast versus ETB? Oh! I think I'm thinking of a very, very old private beta or public beta version of it. Or maybe I just didn't understand what it did at the time. Regardless, it can apply a melee weakness, a new status effect that increases combat vulnerability. It doubles the damage that target takes on the next melee attack. It's interesting. I haven't played enough against Seraph the Patient to super feel comfortable having a read of it. It does get stronger. It never did melee weakness on Rally. Never mind, I'm just bad. It does incant and Rally right now, right? The incant giving it +1 and the Rally giving it +3. The idea with Seraph the Patient is the more actions that you commit, the stronger it becomes, and then it utilizes the strength that you've given it, it's gaining attack the entire time, and the melee weakness to try and chunk down your frontliners, so you just have to find ways around that. All right. New artifacts, 1 new artifact per clan. We'll have a look at these. Actually, you know what? We'll have a look at these right now. The logbook. Because I've been seeing one of these relics a whole lot, but a lot of other people haven't really seen the relic at all. Oh, there's an Umbra one. Oh, no, I have seen that one. I have seen that one. I'll talk about that in just a second. But the Ashes of the Fallen one is Queen's Tale. When you summon your first imp unit each turn, gain an energy and draw 1. Obviously pairs very, very effectively with the new Exiled starter cards, being all of them imps, as well as with the Exiled champion. Just very good to have. All right, the next is the Emblem of the Exiles. I've been finding this a lot, but weirdly, every streamer, every content creator, also like a lot of like individual players that I've talked to, just don't really find this. Like, I just weirdly have good luck finding this, and I'm glad that I do, because it is so powerful. It is not heal the front by 5 health. It gains 5 max health, which also gives it 5 current health, and it happens at the start. Oh, not at the start of combat, at the start of turn. So it will start at the start of your next round. Super powerful. Especially with the clans that it obviously naturally pairs with. Having Awoken, you want your tankiest unit out front. If you play if your tank is the unit, the banner unit you draw in your opening hand, and you play it out, it gets 40 extra health over the course of the next 8 turns, and it's likely going to be there for 8 turns. That is, and heck, if it gets another 2 extra turns on that, like, you know, the amount of time that it takes for Seraph to kind of climb, then it will have the ability to effectively get 2 extra Heartstones. It pogs out of control. Pogs wildly. What's the difference between start of turn and end of turn? Start of turn happens before you commit your actions. End of turn happens after it. Okay. Next up, it is the Kinstone Totem. When a card is discarded before the end of your turn, gain 1 energy. Obviously, what this says is drafts offering totem, a draft offering token. Right? It's also worth noting that the Exiled starter card for the Stygian is also a random discard, but you don't necessarily want to play it in order to generate energy, because you may discard the card that you are trying to generate energy for. It can inconsistently be used for that, though. One thing I've really enjoyed about the Kinstone Totem so far is using it with Deep Consume. Deep Consume is the rare 2-cost discard your hand, draw 5 cards, consume in Stygian. It is so good. ridiculously good. Like, you get a Deep Consume, you double remove its cost, and then you dupe it, and then your first cycle through your deck is just going to be smooth as hell, generating energy, drawing new cards. Just, it's Deep Offering. Was I calling it Deep Consume? I was thinking of the fact that it's a consume card, I believe. Extremely good combination there. Another one of the new ones that we have here, the one that is currently not marked here, is when you play your 20th morsel, I believe. When you play your 20th morsel in a match, deal 100 damage to all enemies, all capitalized, so it's all floors. I may be wrong on this. Does anyone necessarily know if I have the numbers correct on that? Yes, 20th. Is it also 100? 150. Okay, 150. 150 is actually a little bit more generous. Gives it the ability to take out a couple of the enemies it previously would have had difficulty with, but I've not managed to utilize this effectively. As you can see, I imagine it's not yet discovered because I haven't won a run with it. Because I've definitely picked it up before. Does it count with Morsel Maker? Yes. Does it? It does, right? So it counts the Morsel Master and Morsel Maker, the extra cardless imps, right? It'll show up once you've seen it. Weird. I've definitely... Oh, maybe you only saw it on beta. That is possibly true. Possibly entirely true, though. We'll wait for a little bit of clarification on whether it does. Counts the start of fight Morsel Miners on each floor too. It shouldn't, but I've never picked it, so I wouldn't know. Okay. Interesting. Well, that's one we're gonna have to test in the future. But Oblivion X seems a little bit certain that it's doing it with the Morsel Miners at the very start, which would tend to mean that cardless ones are triggering it. I'm not certain. I would want to test that in the future. Whether or not it's super useful, you know, can your deck generate and play that many morsels? Is it going to be doing that at the right opportune time? Probably not. Maybe. Who knows? I don't know what... No memeing, chat. This is legitimately the sentence I was about to say. Maybe it's good? I don't know. I don't know what your deck looks like. Okay, we also have another relic over here. A dagger, which I believe says whenever you lose a stack of burnout, gain 3 stacks of rage, or is it 2 stacks of rage? This one I actually haven't seen myself. I think I saw Teak pick this up once. And then there are no extra ones for just the random events and no extra ones in the clanless artifacts either. 3 rage? Okay, it's 3 rage. So I obviously think that is good, but I have a lot of difficulty assessing the value of the value and power of burnout builds. I'm still working on that. Melting Remnant is by far my worst clan. If like I took Melting Remnant out and was just playing the other 4 clans with combos, I feel like I would be a much more consistent player at this game. But where's the fun in that, right? Do the things that challenge you. That's one of the reasons that I was streaming specifically today Melting Remnant runs, because I just want to get a little bit more exploration in it. I believe if you use Wickless Recruitment, you get 3 rage per stack removed. Neat. That's extremely cool. Looking forward to doing some sick combos with that Smoke Bomb and Wickless Recruitment. Smoke Bomb. How would Smoke Bomb be part of that? What is Smoke Bomb? Oh wait, is Smoke Bomb the name of the relic? I may be missing out on that. Okay, so those are the new relics that got introduced for each of them. Each of them, you know, has a little bit of a combo. Yeah, little bit of a combo with the card that you get as a new champion, as well as the new Exiled starter cards. Either or, actually. Smoke Bomb is Combustible Wax, right? Okay. Next up, we have the new artifacts. Just did that. Personal records. Yeah. Extra log keeping. I like it. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to use it that much. This is just a stat keeping feature. The new expert challenges are 5 more expert challenges for players who have completed Covenant 25. So effectively, those are just going to be extra expert challenges that I eventually conquer as I go through the expert challenges for that game. But I do feel like at the moment, I really want to focus on the new champions and the new exiled starters. Gameplay changes. There were more gameplay changes than just including extra cards in. So, these keywords, however, are related to the extra cards and the extra bosses that just got included. Phased. Phased units cannot attack, be targeted, or take damage in any way. The Arcus's Dark Shards are all phased, so you don't have the ability to remove them. They effectively just they lay this effect upon the floor just for that whole round. Phased also can be on your own character. The Soul Guard has a Titan channel upgrade path that is phased. It has a lot of stats, but you need to use incant stacks in order to actually get it unphased so it can attack back. A lot of people, myself included, are going to get punked by the fact that you cannot use the Titan channel as a tank while it is phased. Do phased units count to the 7 per floor limit? I believe so. Otherwise, you would be able to play extra units on the Soul Guard floor. Finally had a good Titan Channel run today. I'm really glad to hear it. I didn't think Titan Channel was that bad. I like Titan Channel. Titan Channel is stats when you need stats, I feel. All right. And sometimes the only thing you really need is stats. Action Trigger. So this is a new trigger, a la Resolve, Slay, Harvest, etc. The trigger is previously called On Turn. It was used for Daedalus' explosives. And now it's also used on some of the new player units. So triggers on the unit's turn before it attacks. This is really important for one of the new champions called the Hellhorned Shardtail Queen. The Shardtail Queen has an upgrade path called Imperial? Is it Imperial or... It's Imperial, I believe. Has the upgrade path Imperial, where as an action, she will kill all of the imps on her own side and then deal 20 damage AoE to the enemies on that floor. Imperialist, it is. Perfect. 20 damage to all enemies on that floor per imp killed. So this has the ability to clear out, for instance, a bunch of sycophants in the front line, and then the Shardtail Queen will still have the ability to attack the Harvest tank in the back line. It's really nice. It's in the majority of cases, it seems to work out in the player's favor. It kind of tends to that generosity rule these kinds of games tend to have. When playing with a random primary or allied clan, and you restart the run from the pause menu, the clans will now be re-randomized. Not necessarily super relevant. Gameplay. This one is important. Any unit that was eaten now goes to the eaten card pile. So the eaten card pile is a new card pile. You have reformed cards, you have eaten cards, you have... sorry, not reformed cards. You have consumed cards, you have eaten cards, and then you have your remaining deck, and then you got your discard pile way over the other side. This was specifically important in the context of the new Umbra champion, the Primordium, because the Primordium was effectively 3 morsels in a trench coat, right? It was very, very much a morsel that could be eaten multiple times. It was very powerful, but you had the ability to reform it, and reforming it gave it extra stats, which it could then pass on because it passed its own stats, its own attack value, its own health value to the front enemy unit, friendly unit rather. This was essential. This had to happen. It does mean the Primordium doesn't have the ability to go nutty like that anymore, but if that was the possibility, they just last patch, Wild Mutations, they removed the ability for morsels that are eaten to count as harvest triggers, specifically because it felt like it broke the play pattern of playing Umbra and Melting Remnant together, right? You would always go Melting Remnant harvest units and Umbra morsels, right? It almost always tended to be the best choice. Whilst that was still here, right? It was just way too effective for scaling. The reason, obviously, they couldn't let you still reform Primordium is because it would just create the same problem again. It would reintroduce the problem they just fixed last patch. You can, as Sal is currently mentioning in chat, still reform Primordium if it is not eaten. So if you get it killed just before it gets eaten at the very last time, because Primordium can be eaten 3 times, if you get it killed before it eats the last time, or if you Wretch, as the card pile is saying, Wretch pulls from the eaten pile now, so you can use the rare card in Umbra in order to pull it back. There are still things you can do with it. It's just more specific rather than being super easy to access. All right. Shield Stone damage stacks increased from 2 to 3. So the Shield Stone is in the Merchant of Steel. Used to give you 2 damage shield, now gives you 3. I prefer this, naturally. Obviously, it got a little bit more powerful, but oftentimes it felt like damage shields 2 wasn't necessarily commensurate in value to Heartstone, which gives you plus 25 health. This feels a little more comfy. Runestone armor stacks increase from 1 to 2. Now, if the previous one was an increase of 1 damage shield or 50% effectiveness, this is a doubling. I think this might be dangerous. I'm not here to give value or balance judgments or anything like that, but I used to take Runestone armor happily. To be fair, when I am playing a incant build, I often go all incant or no incant, so there is a biasing to the fact there, but this is double effective to what it used to be. In those builds, oh my god. In those builds, oh my god. It means, what does this mean? This is so much of a fix for a problem that I've occasionally had in the Stygian clan, and it's because the Stygian clan has really, really good tanks, but if you keep looking for those tanks and you don't find them, suddenly you're pretty sad about it all. This gives you the ability to make things into tanks, because Guard of the Unnamed, the card that has 5 damage, 10 health, and has incant gain 3 armor, is only 50% more effective than this. You can get a Siren of the Sea, gets +2 incant, +2 to each stat on incant, and give it this, and it is better than a base Guard of the Unnamed. So good. 15 health? Oops. Yeah, oops, my bad. Next up, remove the keyword enhance everywhere to increase clarity. By default, status effects never persist across death in battle. Stat changes always do. No functional changes to the game mechanic were associated with the text change. Yeah, I like that this is more clear now, because the fact that I was so focused on enhancement as the keyword I was looking for made me miss a couple of things that did actually follow with a character after death. So this clarifies it in a way that I think is handy. It's very handy and very necessary. Stackstone now increases Ember cost by 1 in addition to adding double stack. So apparently a large amount of the reason this one was needed was because of the card Alloy of the Ancients. Hellhorned card, 1 cost, spell, apply 25 armor, consume. Apparently that was one of the big reasons that this really needed to change. However, I agree with Scott Free in chat, having just said it is now really niche. It previously felt like something you could apply to a lot of different cards in a lot of different circumstances. Granted, it was very powerful. But now you likely have to pair it with also a cost reduction. Especially if you're like increasing the cost of a card that's already, you know, 3 cost or 2 cost or, God forbid, 5 cost, 1 Horn's Tome. It really hurt Spreading Spores. It just really kicked Spreading Spores straight in the teeth. And I'm pretty sure it was Void Binding. Okay, so I'd heard differently earlier. But Void Binding is another example of a card that would be, or is really, really good with double stack. Especially with the fact that you can double stack it and cost reduce it to have Void Binding cost 0, Void Binding being an Ember Drain card. If you're going to double stack it, you're probably not going to be playing any Ember in the rest of the fight without generating it. So the Void Binding having the ability to play itself even after locking yourself out of all mana, I can see how that would definitely contribute to this. All right. Next up is Hope for Peace now affects spells to avoid common confusion with Monster Railspike. Fair enough. Yeah, you can Monster Railspike a card, giving it Purge, but obviously the Hope for Peace doesn't really play well with that. It's expecting Purge spells, so it's now just making that a bit clearer. It also feels bad when you're in circumstance Or I imagine it would feel bad because I've never had Monster Rail Spike and Hope for Peace at the same time, but I imagine it would have felt bad, like putting it on a train steward, trying to play out the train steward, and then the train steward comes back. Oftentimes that event, the Monster Rail Spike and the Spell Rail Spike event, oftentimes for me that ends up just being remove a card. Hope for Peace plus Monster Rail Spike was a cool interaction. Whilst cool, I imagine it's like so niche that this isn't really going to have much of an impact at all. Redesign Gnarled Root. It now gives +1 attack for each stack of spikes. I really, really like that, especially in the context of a Melting Remnant and Awoken run, because the Awoken can do some real nutty stuff with a Melting Remnant little Fade champion that has a bunch of stacks on it, and then Adaptive Mutation to change its stats, and then it has ridiculous damage and ridiculous stats. Oh, it's beautiful. Things can get really nutty with that. Another reason I really like the Gnarled Root upgrade is because it means the Thorned Hollow has a little bit of a better time clearing out backliners. It's just good. Added a leave option to the Armageddon Battlefield Concealed Caverns event. I guess there are circumstances where you won't want any cards from that, but it's got to be very, very rare. Trying to drink the cap of my bottle here. Yeah, purge a unit with benefits, exactly. Purge a unit, but have one very good turn in the next fight. Okay. Next up. Hellhorned gameplay changes. Impressive is now attuned. Did this not mention attuned earlier? It did actually mention attuned. I didn't mention it. Attuned is a extra modifier that spell cards have at this point. If it is attuned, it will benefit 5 times from any magic power applied to it. The goal is to increase late game viability of certain cards. I had for a long time talked about the fact that, like, you know, Glimmer is 2 damage AoE, 2 healing AoE as well. If you give that +10 magic power, it is 6 times as effective. However, if you have, I'm not going to use Inferno as an example because it doesn't actually have attuned on it, but if you have, what's the 3 cost that hits the front line for 60 damage in Stygian? The Anchor. Totally forgotten its name at this point. But if you have that card and you give it +10, it is basically as effective as it used to be. Crypt Builder. Yes, Crypt Builder. It's basically as effective as it used to be. Now, it has attuned. It gets 50 extra damage from that rather than the 10. So much more impactful and so very necessary, because oftentimes those cards felt really dead in late game, right? Am I going to push this 190 health unit to the back line so that I can't hit it, and then it just has 120 health and goes to the top? Probably not. Probably not super jazzed about it. Gifts for Regard is a very, very good combo point with this. That's a very good point to make, Sal, because Gifts for Regard, while it draws you the 3 cards, obviously makes them consume, make them all 0 cost as well, it also applies 20 magic power. It's not this card does 20 more damage, it applies 20 magic power, which means the attuned applies on top of that. So you get 100 extra damage. Gifts for Regard decks are going to have real fun with attuned. All right, let's go back down. So Impressive, which is sacrifice your own unit, your own imp specifically, in order to deal 50 damage to the frontline enemy unit, is now attuned. So you have the ability to put a +10 on it, and it does 100 damage. Significantly better. Very happy about that. Ritual Battle has had its rage gain increase from 8 to 10. Remember when I said, like, I don't know if it needs to be increased from 6 to 8? Apparently it did. Maybe I just really liked Ritual Battle beforehand. However, I would say overall in this patch, Ritual Battle may have become slightly less powerful due to the fact that now you can't double stack it and reduce its cost and have a 2-cost Ritual Battle in the deck. That was mostly because of the double stack nerf. That makes sense. Cards that are very, very expensive obviously have the ability to have a lot initially of a stack on them, right? Ritual Battle 3 cost has 10 rage on it, which is exactly why you want to target it with double stack. But because it increases its cost now, that's exactly why you don't want to target it with double stack anymore. I'll admit, I've played with the double stack change for a while now. I don't like it. The amount of times I have been like, yeah, cool, I'll put double... No. I won't. The amount of times I've had that happen has been a lot. Very much, maybe most. Awoken gameplay changes. Sting now does from 5 to 10. Neat. Not really much to discuss on that. Makes them a little bit more usable. The Stygian gameplay changes. Titan's Gratitude has been reduced back from 30 to 25. It was previously increased in the Wild Mutations patch from 25 to 30. But now it appears they've found exactly how they want to make it a more effective frontline unit, and that's by giving it attuned. Attuning this card and then having a 75 damage to the front line very early on, spicy, extremely good. I'm no longer that, about seeing a Titan's Gratitude in my opening deck. Ice and Pyre is also attuned. That is the 90 damage to the front enemy liner Pyre bound, so you can only play it in the top 2 floors. You could play it in the Pyre, I guess. But neat, 140 damage to your front enemy liner. That lines up neatly with a couple of the life totals of frontline enemies. So it can be relevant. Crypt Builder, again, also attuned. So far, we've seen all of the attuned cards are targeting frontliner targets specifically. Impressive, Crypt Builder, Ice and Pyre, Titan's Gratitude, all of these target the front enemy unit. New keyword is Shard. Powers Solgard the Martyr's abilities. So Solgard has, by base, I think Solgard is the only character to, by base, the only champion by base to have text on it. So even without an upgrade path, it already has text. And the text is incant, gain 1 shard. And then all of the different upgrade paths use those shards in different ways. Nah? Ooh, who is the other one? Who am I missing? Primordium has buffet. Okay. Okay, yes. Primordium has buffet as well as the Eater increases its stats by the health and damage of the Primordium. So the Primordium also has stuff on it. The Soul Guard and the Primordium, they are still relatively unique in that none of the base characters, that is to say the base champions that were in the game from the very start, had any text on them. Unless I'm entirely forgetting something. Neat. One thing I do like about Soul Guard the Martyr is because I like to go all or nothing in incant builds, and Soul Guard being a card that you get early that is an incant synergy really pushes you in that direction, so I'm extremely, extremely happy to do that. What if Phase meets Relentless? I imagine the unit will just move past you. They walk by you and you die? Yeah, because you can't engage them in battle, so they've finished battle on that floor, they leave. All right. Next up, Umbra gameplay changes. Feast now only triggers if there is a unit that can feed in the room. I didn't even know it could previously trigger without that. Seems more of a bug fix than a balance fix there. New keyword, buffet. Units with buffet can be eaten more than once. Currently, Primordium is the only unit with buffet. I like that currently in there, the possibility that there may be more of them in the future. But yes, the Primordium comes in by base with 3 buffet. You can do a line to increase its amount of buffet so it can be eaten more times. But it's just a neat idea to have a morsel that can be eaten multiple times. Super, super cool. Apparently, the Primordium used to be without buffet. It was just effectively all of the stats you would get from it at once. So you just got a really big minion, like plus 40-40. I'm glad they went with buffet instead, because otherwise I would have felt like my champion is a glorified buff. So much of the fight would come down to, here's my banner unit and here's my champion. It's the one that gets plus 40-40 and time to go. Melting Remnant changes. Momentum Mori, rarity was changed from rare to uncommon. That's fine. It's, I guess Melting Remnant is lacking a little bit of frontline damage. Gives you the ability to do that a little bit better. It's okay. I still don't rate Memento Mori particularly high, but also, again, I'm not necessarily as comfortable with Melting Remnant as I would like to be, and maybe in the future I would be killing more of their units more consistently. Intent on Death, rarity was changed from uncommon to rare, and its Ember cost was increased from 0 to 2. Largely, I imagine, this is a direct knock-on impact from the fact that Little Fade, the new Melting Remnant champion, has 2 different paths that have extinguish effects on them, and the extinguish effects are quite powerful. One of them in particular is an endless version that has extinguish that increases its stats, but also its mana cost. So if you could just sit that in a back line and constantly intent on death it would get extremely big, and it would completely skip out on the downside, the possible downside that is, of having to replay it with a high energy cost. This, yeah, it had to happen. Otherwise, like, so much of Melting Remnant gameplay would be looking for intent on death and looking for that character and then just trying to go off. This had to happen. I hate that it had to happen because I really liked intent on death just broadly, but for Little Fade to exist, intent on death had to die. Paraffin Enforcer health has been increased from 15 to 25. Okay, that makes Paraffin Enforcer like a much more comfortable frontliner in the early game. I'm probably going to take Paraffin Enforcer more consistently now. Although, probably not until I have, or probably not when I have the Melting Remnant exiled cards. I still kind of want drafts if I'm doing it early on just to have chunks to put behind the Paraffin Enforcer. Because I like to take the Paraffin Enforcer when it already is supported by the deck, and then use the deck to continue supporting the Paraffin Enforcer rather than like trying to take Paraffin Enforcer when it's not doing anything and then trying to make it do something. Paraffin Enforcer is also very, very nice with Firelight Little Fade. So Firelight Little Fade is one of the ones that I was mentioning before. Its Extinguish effect is, or at least its Extinguish effect for its first form, is give all friendly units on this floor +5 attack, +1 health, and +2 burnout. So doing that, obviously on the same floor as the Paraffin Enforcer, means you can get a very, very high attack floor. Really, really keen on trying that out. Mortal Entrapment Days has been increased from 2 to 3, and the card is now attuned. Yeah, Mortal Entrapment was 3 cost, like it is 3 cost still, but it always felt like it underperformed unless I double cost reduced it. And at that point, like, you know, any card is pretty good with a double cost reduce. Most of them at the absolute least. So I'm very, very glad that Mortal Entrapment, it's not Molten, it's Mortal. I'm very glad that Mortal Entrapment has had this change. Seemed entirely necessary to me. I'm pretty sure the rest of these... Yeah, the rest of these are not things we've been encountering consistently in the game and not bugs that I think make a significant impact. They all seem to be kind of edge cases. Although I will note there are new music tracks for Arcus and Talon. I don't really recognize music while I play games, but people tell me the music in this game bops, so there's 2 new boppin' tracks in there. And that's the patch notes for friends and foes.